In today's Leeds news, Rutter to Brighton, LUFC Trust comment, Farke takes responsibility, and now what for the 49ers? Morning folks, Share here Thursday morning the 15th of August with your Leeds United news. A very sombre morning as reality kicked in big time last night as Leeds were humbled 3-0 at home in the Cup. Another loss, that's 2 wins in 11 competitive games for Leeds since the back end of last season, and questions are starting to get asked around a lot of things. The big story and the main story we're going to be covering today is around the Georginio Rutter exit and what's happened. And what I'm going to do here is I have got an opinion piece on this as well, but I'm going to do it at the end of the video. So I'm going to cover the detail around what's going on and where we are at the situation right now, the trust statement on that, Daniel Farke's comments on the game last night, and then at the very end I'll do my opinions on everything that's been said by the 49ers up until this point and whether any of this holds water anymore or if we should be asking some serious questions at this point. And I know what the bulk of the comments are going to be in this, but we'll do that at the very end of this video and we'll get into my thoughts on this and they might surprise you. Start off with this. So last night, after Leeds 3-0 defeat at home to Middlesbrough, news came out that Brighton and Hove Albion had activated a release clause in Georginio Rutter's contract for £40 million, and the player is all but heading to Brighton. David Ornstein broke the story last night and he said that the release clause had been activated and that now contact will be made between the player and the club. Joe Donoghue has done a really good piece. He's done a series of excellent pieces this morning in the Yorkshire Evening Post, and I highly recommend you check out at least one of them, because one of them talks around the excessive amount of exit clauses that were negotiated during the Radrizzani, Orta and Angus Kinnear time at Leeds, and Kinnear very much involved as CEO of the club right now. Brighton have made 3 bids for Georginio Rutter up until this point. The initial bid that they made was a £29 million bid for the player that was rejected out of hand by Leeds United. The second bid came in that we heard about a couple of weeks ago, and that was a £35 million bid that would match what Leeds had paid for Rutter. The structure of Leeds' bid for Rutter initially is £25 million plus 10 in add-ons, so those add-ons may not necessarily have kicked in just yet. The third bid that came in last night, appears to have hit the sweet spot. The £40 million release clause, that again, another release clause that we weren't told existed. We were told that there were no more clauses, and we've just seen clause after clause after clause pop up repeatedly, one after the other. The situation here means that Leeds are in a weird position. Why would someone buy a £35 million player and then in his contract put a £5 million increase as a sell-on for a player that you think has a very high ceiling? The negotiation that Orta and Kinnear did around that deal has massive question marks to be asked about their ability to make contracts, and Orta's question, there's lots of questions around Orta's ability to negotiate contracts as it is. But as the release clause has been met, it has been said that Leeds are now powerless in this situation, although attempts are being made by Leeds in order to try and keep the player. We'll get into that in a second. The offer is said to have gone in before the expiry of the clause, which was midnight last night. These clauses all seem to be expiring at different times, but always just after a bid has come in for the player. The reason for the expiry being when it is was said to be because Leeds wanted to give themselves time to get a replacement in should a player leave. However, we've seen with Chris Somerville that the 49ers don't appear to be in any rush to bring players in to replace these players immediately. But again, I'll give you my thoughts on that towards the back end of the video. News came out this morning from Florian Plettenberg, and it should be said he tends to jump the shark quite early on a lot of stuff to be first, and he's not 100% correct on his tweet that's gone out today. He says that the deal is done, that personal terms have been agreed and a medical has been scheduled, and the player will be done and dusted to Brighton within the next 72 hours. That, as of right now, is not the case. Joe Donoghue later on this morning claims that Leeds are willing to offer Georginio Rutter an improved deal in order to get him to stay with Leeds United. Donoghue says in a desperate attempt to get the player to stay at the club, they're willing to offer improved terms to do this, but it should be said that this should have been done before now. Leeds knew about this clause. Why was this not negotiated before now? And the same should be said for Chris Somerville's contract as well. Why were they not negotiated earlier? And why is it a reactive decision rather than a proactive decision with these players? This morning then, Joe's put out a couple of other tweets. Joe Donoghue says that the club chiefs were locked in discussions last night in an attempt to try and get the player to stay, and the player himself was seen leaving Elland Road in tears last night at the realisation that he probably played his last game at Elland Road. Leeds' position is weak in this situation because Georginio has the offer of Premier League football, Premier League wages, and a much calmer club, it has to be said. Georginio Rutter was seen reacting, shaking his head to the booing of Leeds players coming onto the park, along with the exits of Chris Somerville and Archie Gray, and the lack of incomings of a decent level to replace them. You could understand why Georginio would maybe see that his future could be elsewhere. He gave an awful lot for Leeds. He made himself available for the game last night, even though he knew that this offer had come in. The player still wanted to play for Leeds last night, and he has always worn his heart on his sleeve for Leeds United, and that should be said. In the latest update from Donoghue this morning, he says that Leeds are willing to try to retain Rutter and are doing everything they can, but they acknowledge that their chances of getting that done are slim. There has been some other updates come out this morning. It's not a great position. Again, I'll give you my thoughts on this right now, but it does appear for all intents and purposes that this deal will be done, but it isn't done right now, opposing to what Florian Plettenberg said. The Leeds United Supporters Trust have been in contact with Leeds United this morning, and they've been speaking to the club, and they've released a statement which reads as the following. We've been in open discussions with the club about Georginio's situation. As the media have reported, we can confirm that a release clause activated by Brighton officially expired at midnight yesterday. This leaves Georgie with a decision: join Brighton or stay at Leeds. We've been informed that as of now, nothing has been finalised. The club has told us that when Georgie first joined, he, like any other player in similar situations, would only sign his contract included a relegation release clause. We are now at the point where Georgie's future with the club is uncertain, and that the decision to stay or leave rests entirely with him. The club has assured us that they are doing everything in their power to convince him to remain at Leeds United, but ultimately it hangs in the balance. We are as frustrated as everyone else and have made it clear that we as fans expect the club to come out and give some clear answers and accountability on the situation we now find ourselves in. It is not on the trust to pass information on second hand. Fans want to hear directly from the ownership. The club have commented to address fans once the transfer window is closed. It's becoming increasingly evident that the reality we're facing is far from what was presented by Parag at the end of the season, and we deserve an explanation. The potential loss of a player like Rutter, particularly without substantial reinforcements, would be a significant blow, especially in light of recent departures of Archie Gray and Crescencio Somerville. We expect the club to address these concerns directly. So the Trust have done the right thing. They basically said that it's not their job to ease the fans. It's not my job. I keep getting called the voice of reason. It's not my job to calm everybody down. It's the club's job to calm everybody down. There are fans that will react to things emotionally straight out of the gate, and that's absolutely fine. That's okay. That's how some fans react. And there are other fans that are a little bit calmer and will try and wait to see how things pan out. And now I'm in that bracket. But it's becoming harder and harder to support this, and it's really getting tricky to sit back and go, yeah, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that light at the end of the tunnel is fast approaching, and it's starting to look very much like a train and not salvation. So unless something happens rapidly, it's getting harder and harder to defend the current position that Leeds are in. But we'll give it a go, but we'll get to that in a second. But right now, we move on to what Daniel Farke said yesterday after the game. There's question marks around Daniel Farke's decision making yesterday as well. And after, in light of a shocking defensive performance at home in the Cup last night, and Leeds conceding 6 goals at Ellen Road in the first 2 games of the season, there are some questions. Farke says that 8 changes may have contributed to the performance, and he takes the blame for that. He has put the blame on his shoulders and has defended his team in this situation. However, it should be said that Middlesbrough made 7 changes also going into that game, and it didn't appear to affect them as much. The drop-off in tempo again in the first half by Leeds is a concern for me because it happens regularly now. And it also gave Middlesbrough a foothold to play back into the game. There's also question marks around the shape of the midfield. Ethan Ampadu moving back into midfield, it doesn't appear to have really happened. He seems to spend the bulk of his time between the 2 centre-backs defending very, very, very deep, which means Joe Rothwell or Ilya Gruev, when they've been in there, have been completely isolated in the middle of the park, and it leaves a huge amount of space for Borough to play in, which they did in the second half and got some significant joy out playing into that area and then playing back out into wide areas. So question marks around that shape have to be asked as well. Farke says that he understands the fans' situation right now and their perspective, but he remains calm as it's only 1 league game and only 1 cup game. But it seems strange to say that at this point of the season, going into the West Brom at the game at the weekend, that's possibly becoming a must-win game, and that's not hyperbole and that's not overreacting. If we don't win that game, it will be 2 wins in 12 competitive matches at that point, and there's a problem there that needs to be addressed. The form isn't there, the players aren't performing, and all of a sudden what was a great defence last season appears to have gone completely by the wayside. The more the pressure builds, and with the exits that happened over the summer and with the way the summer has gone, the more bad performances Leeds put in, the higher and the faster the pressure is going to build on Daniel Farke. There is a September international break that is approaching as well, and that could be an obvious choice if Leeds are not happy with the situation to change it. Then I'm not in the mind of sacking managers quickly. I like to give managers time, but Leeds need to get out of this division this year, or the exits we're seeing right now will only be heightened next season with a raft of more sales after Leeds' parachute payments dropped to 15% of their original level. So there's a lot to get into there, and Leeds need to be mindful of that. And Daniel Farke needs to get the team to stop conceding so many goals and start creating some clear chances. Leeds created very little yesterday, and with Rutter going, your main creative player, means you're lacking creativity in that middle of the park. He's taken it on his shoulders, as he should. It was his team selection, but I don't believe that the 8 players that went in there were any less than the players that came out. It's still a decent side, and for 45 minutes, Leeds were the better side, and then a very slow second half start that saw Leeds have less than 5% possession during a period of time when Middlesbrough scored twice. Should be asked, the 5 changes then compounded things as well. By making 5 changes at one time, you feed into the panic, and it causes mistakes, and the third goal goes in, then the game is done. But yeah, we'll get to that later on in the podcast. We'll do it later on, Stephen. We'll get into that in a bit more detail. But then moving on, just the thoughts on the 49ers and where we sit with the situation with the 49ers. And I wanted to kind of go through things a bit logically, through chronological order. At the end of last season, Parag Marathe spoke to the journalists and the media in a very good interview at the time, a very calm interview. And in that, he made a couple of statements, and I wanted to break those statements down. The first one was that we were past the point of loan exit release clauses. They were gone. The first time we heard of that was Jack Harrison going back to Everton. We were told that it was Harrison and Aronson were the only 2 players that had loan release clauses in their contracts. Aronson had decided then waive his loan exit clause, and he was committed to playing for Leeds this season. That meant it was just Harrison until Mark Rocket went to Real Betis for a cut price deal, and then we were told actually no, it was Rocket and Harrison that had the loan release clauses and not Aronson at all, which seems strange if the player had waived an imaginary release clause. Then Llorente goes to Betis for a cut price deal as well, and we're told actually no, sorry, it was Harrison and Llorente that had the loan exit clauses and not the other 2. They keep popping up. They keep on popping up. Then we were told that Leeds would negotiate releases of players on their terms, that we were in that position now we could negotiate on our terms. Crescencio Somerville leaves Leeds United due to a release clause in his contract. Leeds are not in control of that situation, so to say we can dictate that is incorrect. Archie Gray is sold because of a PSR deadline and needing to get money in, and the only offer on the table was Archie. Leeds have to sell. So you're not in control of that situation either. And now Georginio Rutter looks like he's heading off because of a release clause in his contract. Again, you're not in control. So to say that you're negotiating on your terms when you have 3 players that were forced to leave the club because they weren't on your terms is a strange statement to make, and one outside of his negotiating contracts in his sleep. That to me is a statement that will follow Parag Marathe around unless some significant business is done in the market before the end of the window. We then move on to replacing players with players. We were told that should a high profile player leave Leeds United, they will be replaced with a similar calibre player or similar profile player. That was until we lost Archie Gray, Chris Somerville, and then we saw that hasn't happened. We replaced Archie Gray with a right back in Jayden Bogle. That's fine, but not the same level that you'd get with Archie in midfield or moving forward. Glenn Kamara's left, hasn't been replaced really. Then you look at Crescencio Somerville leaving. That hasn't happened. We haven't replaced him yet. And then Daniel Farke makes comments about Leeds having to work within financial restrictions. So therefore, we can't replace big profile players with big profile players because we don't have the money to do that. So again, a statement that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Then we get to the point around Leeds would operate on the cusp of PSR. Right at the high end of PSR, as high as they can. And we haven't seen that. Leeds have brought in the second most amount of money of any club in Europe this summer and have spent less than £15 million. Now, it should be said, and I will not jump to hyperbole here, it should be said that Kieran Maguire explained how these contract situations work. That money doesn't come in one lump sum. It's broken up over a couple of years, usually a 3-year period. And during that period as well, there is a FIFA ruling that states that any debts that you have and transfer obligations that you've already owed clubs must be met with that money before you can then spend it. And Leeds have got obligations that they have to reach, but that's not the point that I'm making here. I can accept that if that is what is being said, but Leeds have made some statements that right now don't add up. And I will say right now, Leeds could very easily kick into hyperdrive in the next couple of days and bring in some significant signings in order to replace the players that have left. But you're talking about a situation where if Rutter goes, you're going to have to bring in a Smodics, a Clark and a Whittaker. to just appease everybody and get back to being able to create some actual real chances. So it's unlikely, but we'll have to see how the situation evolves over the next couple of days and hours, and we'll see if there's any updates on that later on the day. But for now, folks, that's going to be it for me today. The podcast will be out later on tonight. Tomorrow night we'll have the match day review ahead of the West Brom game, and then we're back into football again. Try and have a good day if you can. I hope this has helped in some way, at least to put the facts in order. He hasn't gone yet. It's expected he will, but we'll have to wait and see. Thanks for watching as always. Thanks for supporting the channel, and I'll see you later on. Thanks. Bye.